Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode number 61 of the Avocado Gamescast. Some of you are probably longtime listeners, and if we've advertised this episode correctly, some of you are new listeners, because today we're going to talk about how to get into gaming. With many of us under lockdown due to COVID 19 and unable to go outside and have fun, we are turning towards indoor pursuits like books and Netflix, and of course, video games. But getting into video games can be kind of daunting, especially if you've never gamed before. So you might be wondering, which system should I get? Which game should I buy? Where can I find deals? Hopefully this episode can serve as a guide for you. Anyway, I'm Merve, and I'm joined by longtime podcast editor and co-runner, the Kappa.
How's it going?
I am doing as well as one can be expected, not going outside.
Same thing. I'm actually essential, so I'm outside all the time. It's just, man, I kind of have like the opposite thing going on. I don't like going out, and then like when I come home, I feel like safe again, you know. And it's like the opposite. Like my wife is just, I envy you so much for going out. So
yeah, the grass is kind of always greener.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, for me, it's all just 100% work from home now, and like most of my job could probably be done work from home. I'm realizing it's nice to have a routine where you just go into the office every day, and I'm just kind of missing that now.
Yeah. It's that weird mix of like, you know, part of it's just missing what you used to enjoy, and then part of it's just wondering like, what would I be doing now anyway? Because honestly, I'd probably be doing a lot of the same stuff, you know, just sitting home playing games, but it just feels like, you know, missing out on something. So
yeah, if anything, my workload has increased since the lockdown. All my friends are just like, hey, do you have time to play video games now? I'm like, I have to work.
I got the opposite going on. I'm actually taking vacation next week because they kind of said, look, it's real slow right now. They're not forcing us to take vacation, but they kind of encourage, you know, hey, burn some vacation, sit at home if you need to. You know, so that's going to be my thing. I'm just going to be sitting at home next week building a computer.
That's good. You ordered a new machine?
Sure did. I went all out on this one, so kind of embarrassingly so, but I got a good bonus this year, so I figured, you know, it's that time.
Well, go for it.
Yeah, I got a unique situation too, where like my kids are into it, my wife plays, so you know, I get to pass I don't ever throw out a computer. You know, everything goes down one level basically. So my 3-year-old's going to get my 7-year-old's computer. My 7-year-old's going to get my old one. My wife's going to get his old. It's just all kind of a shuffle. So everybody's getting one, which is a nice feeling because it's easy to keep. I think it's easier than ever. I guess we'll get more into this, but it's easier than ever to keep your PC up to date. But when you've got a 5, 6, 7, 8-year-old one, it's just a little bit harder to even get it to run certain stuff at this point. So in order for us all to be able to play together, got to make some sacrifices, I guess.
Yeah, even if you're not gaming, like my dad's trying to replace, and he just called me today. He was trying to replace a 9-year-old laptop, and like it even becomes hard to like browse the internet on a machine that old.
Yeah,
Especially nowadays when websites have all this dynamic nonsense and scripting going on in the background.
I know. Yeah, it's and you start to realize how much embeds and loads and side loads and everything's doing. So it can feel a little overwhelming quick. And you know, you start to take it for granted when you've got a new one, but then you start to feel the age show a little bit, and you know, all of a sudden that drive, at least for me, kicks in. It's okay, time to upgrade. So I guess that's what we're kind of here today to talk about.
Yeah. What we're going to do in this episode is we're going to kind of split it in half. The first half's going to be for all you first-time gamers who haven't really played video games before, aside from, you know, maybe a couple of casual games on your phone or like a couple of browser games when you were younger. If you're new to gaming, we're here to help you kind of figure out what you want to play and how to go about playing it. And the second half is going to be for people who are returning to gaming, because what I'm hearing from a lot of people, I think Kappa's been hearing from some people as well, like I used to game 5 or 6 years ago and I was really into it, and then I kind of fell out and now I want to get back in. So we're going to try and see if we can help you out with that.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So for all you newbies, there are a bunch of options out there for you. The main places where you might game, kind of 4 categories of platforms you can game on. can game on your PC or like a desktop computer or a gaming laptop. You can game on dedicated consoles. You can a new technology that's popped up is streaming games.
Yep.
And there's also kind of hardcore mobile gaming, which is in kind of two subcategories: dedicated handheld consoles, and then more like hardcore gaming on your phone. So let's kind of go one by one. Let's actually start. PCs are actually kind of the most complicated bit of this. So let's start with consoles, because I think that's kind of where everyone wants to
I
start
think that's
with this.
probably, I would say for most people, if this is your entrance point, it kind of makes sense right now. I will say this before we get into PCs and everything, but consoles these days are more PCs than they are consoles in some ways. They make everything easy and they look all the same, but you're getting a lot of power these days under the hood of modern consoles. It's not like what you remember if you haven't, gamed in years or haven't kept up with it, or never have. Consoles aren't like they used to be, where it was a huge step down between that and PC gaming, I feel like, anymore. I load up my Xbox One X and, play some games on it, and they look pretty good. I'd say just as good as some of the other games. It's depending on how it's optimized.
Yeah.
So I think I'll start out by saying kind of one of the huge pros with consoles is you take it home, you put it in, it's going to work. You might have to download some patches and stuff, but generally speaking, you're getting kind of the developer's vision of that game at that system. There's very few shortcuts made anymore for a game, or modes cut out or things like that, like there was for a little bit on console. Right now, you're getting a very, very, very good experience on a console that I don't think is really compromised or anything, if you want to say it like that, but it's a good time right now to be in console gaming, I feel like. And though some gatekeepers and the PC master race people might disagree, I think that console right now is a very good option if you're looking to just get into gaming right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Just even comparing for when I first got into console gaming, because I'm traditionally like a PC gamer from way
Same.
back.
Yeah.
But when I first got into console gaming, say, I guess 7 years ago now, it was a very different space where
Right.
you're clearly getting a more compromised experience on a console as compared to a PC. And nowadays, unless you're kind of going all out on your PC, you get a really good experience on a modern home console.
Yeah. I remember one of the early experiences, probably last generation of console, maybe even before that, was what modes weren't there, or what features weren't there, or what settings weren't there from PC to console. And it made the choice between them kind of a no-brainer if you were looking for, that. But now I think when you're playing a console game, you're getting exactly what you should be getting, which is a full fleshed out game that's not making any kind of, weird excuses for itself and why they can't do certain things, because they're powerful. I will say that if you're looking at a console, you probably should be pairing it with a pretty modern TV. I don't think you need to be doing anything crazy, but I think most people at this point, if you've got any kind of TV in the last 10-15 years, your console should be able to take advantage of most of them. There's going to be some bells and whistles that might be available on other TVs that make the console really enable all of its power, I guess I should say. So, but it's a combo these days that you have to kind of keep in mind when you go console and TV for most things.
Yeah, like you're not going to be getting a great experience if you're running your video output to like an old CRT TV.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But basically, any like HD TV from the past decade or so is gonna work pretty well.
If this is your entry point, don't worry about buying into things like HDR or things like the golden HDMI cables they sell you at Best Buy for $50 or whatever. All those bells and whistles aren't necessary, because truthfully, when you're first getting into gaming, all those little things that like people have gamed for years and years notice, like screen tearing, refresh rates, things like that, you're not going to notice it at first. It's just going to look cool and beautiful and gorgeous for you on a cool big screen TV, and that's good. When your eye starts to kind of notice those things, that's when those things start to matter. But don't if you're looking to just get into gaming at this point, stick with a console, go with the TV you have. Don't feel like you got to buy a TV to go with the console, and don't let anybody trick you when it comes to silly cables or features or HDR, things like that. They add something, but I wouldn't say that if you don't already have something, it's not it's not a deal breaker. It's not something that you absolutely have to have.
The way I'd put it right is that right now you can't really walk into a Best Buy and buy gold-plated cables anyway. Just order regular cables off Amazon.
There you go. Yeah, I mean, you can save a good deal. Just the cables are other cables. I've always believed that. Now you want to get ones that are modern cables, but I don't think anybody's going to sell you an old style one that doesn't do like the data compression or whatever it's called. But
The Amazon Basics ones are just
yeah,
fine. They
absolutely.
do exactly what you need.
The physical. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, let's actually specify what consoles there are out
Sure.
there for people to buy. So there are three major consoles, and one of them's kind of weird, so we're going to talk about it last. But the first two that are kind of similar are the PlayStation 4, made by Sony, and the Xbox One, made by Microsoft. So they both tend to get most of the big, fancy, big budget games that everyone's talking about. Both of them have their own exclusive games that are made specially for that console. So PlayStation has famous series like Uncharted, and what else they got on PlayStation?
God of War, Spider-Man, Last
God
of
of War,
Us.
Last of Us, Horizon Zero Dawn. So these are all names you might have heard of floating around on the internet. That's what you're going to get on PlayStation. On Xbox, you're going to get Gears of War, Forza, Halo. Sunset Overdrive, Sea of Thieves.
Sea of Thieves. Yep.
Yeah, games like that.
I would say, we'll probably get into more about the pros and cons of each one. But the number one thing that I would say right now is if you were looking to get into it, it's probably to play with someone, hopefully, or maybe, have friends who play with it. If you don't, it's fine. This doesn't become as big of an issue. But the number one thing you want to know is that you can't play across platform right now for most games. It's something that it's become a hotter issue in the past year or two. But if you're looking to get into gaming because your best friend is on a PlayStation 4, your best bet's going to be a PlayStation 4. Play where your friends are for the most part right now. So if that's kind of one of the things you're not sure about, ask them, what they're playing on, and kind of start from there. But past that, I mean, the pros and cons, there's, it's an ecosystem type thing. So if you're familiar with, Android versus Apple, or, Facebook versus Google, or any other kind of, system like that, once you're in one, you kind of spend the money and you're into that one, locked in at least somewhat. There's plenty of people who have both, but I feel like especially right now, people are kind of choosing between the two rather than both of the two. If the exclusives are important to you, PlayStation is going to win pretty much every time. If being able to have kind of a good, seamless online experience is the most important thing to you, I feel like Xbox has the upper hand there.
PlayStation 4 has vastly improved for PlayStation 3 in the online department, but Xbox Live just has it beat in every dimension, I would say.
Sure. And when we talk about Xbox Live, that's the online component of Xbox, but you've probably heard a lot of the jokes about how toxic this, toxic that is. And while there is some of that, honestly, they've filtered it out now. So when you join up on Xbox, it says, what kind of player are you? And you can choose casual. You can choose, I don't play a lot. I'm just here for fun. I'm not trying to set scores or whatever. And they'll, generally speaking, try to match you up with people who filter along that. Good muting options now, good reporting options. So that's on PlayStation 2. So don't let that part of gaming scare you away. It used to be really bad. It's still bad, if you're, a certain, definitely for women, definitely for minorities, in games. I think you hear it a lot more, but I feel like the options right now are a lot better just to kind of shut people out and just play the way you want to play, and you don't have to tune in. It's not forcing you to like it used to.
Yeah, like to some extent, take this with the caveat that we are like two dudes speaking on the internet. But I would say gaming culture has vastly improved in a lot of dimensions over the past decade or so. Mm-hmm. And I think it's a much friendlier and more inclusive space than it was at the start of the last decade.
And some of it is how the systems themselves reward people for being that, and some are how they punish people for not being that. So getting banned off of Xbox Live is a big deal. So you see far less of the harassment that, the targeted harassment I think you used to see. It's still present. It's still there. But when you're looking at possibly losing your account and access to games you've bought, you see a lot less because now there's actually an incentive to kind of keep up with it. Microsoft takes it very seriously. I get an email from them like once a month, like, have you played with any toxic people? What was this like? So they're taking it seriously. I'm sure PlayStation does the same. I just tend not to play their games online as much, so I don't have any firsthand experience with that. But it's not as it's maybe not as bad as it was. It's still bad. It still can be bad, especially in certain games and certain situations. But generally speaking, if you're jumping on to play a couple of games of Madden with your buddies, you're not going to be having people jumping in and saying stuff to you or whatever. So to kind of clean that up.
Yeah. The other thing that we want to talk about with regard to consoles and stuff that like pros and cons, like Xbox, I think, kind of has a reputation for more like specializing in action games, like especially your Gears and Halo. If you're really into like games where you might like shoot people or like games that like are fast paced, I think Xbox is kind of the way to go. A lot of you might be fans of, say, like anime or manga. If you're like into Japanese pop culture, PlayStation's probably the way to go, although Xbox is starting to get some of those games too. So it really, like, when it comes down to Xbox versus PlayStation, the main two factors here are where your friends playing and which games do you want to play.
Yep, I completely agree with that. So one thing I would talk about too, a lot of people who haven't gamed or whatever might just be wondering about, like, how do you hook these things up? It's pretty easy. It's gone are the days where you have to find the right channel and the right input and this and that. Generally speaking, now most consoles are plug and play. You hook the HDMI cable up. Maybe you hook up an internet cable, or they all have built-in Wi-Fi now. You turn it on and it sets it up for you. It's not as complicated as it was in a couple ages past. They do tend to update themselves a lot more than they used to. So be prepared for if you buy a brand new game. And you get all excited to sit down and play it, odds are you won't be. Give yourself, maybe 30, 45 minutes before you start, downloading things and updating things and stuff like that, depending on your connection. I will say that, as far as physically hooking them up, I am a big proponent of hardwiring your internet into your consoles. I feel like it just...
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. It tends to, Wi-Fi is good, but it's one of those things where it tends to drop just when you don't want it to. So hardwire it if you can.
Yeah, I purposely set up my apartment so that I could hardwire both my PC and my PlayStation into my router. Because I just think it's essential to do that if you're going to be playing on the internet.
Yep, I agree.
Yeah. So that's PlayStation versus Xbox. It's not even necessarily versus. A lot of people have both consoles, although for first timer, you're probably just picking one. Then there's also the Nintendo Switch, which is a little bit of an interesting case because it's both a home console and a portable console. So you can stick it in a dock that plugs into your TV and play games on your TV, or you can also take the controllers with you on the go. They slot right into the machine that you can pick up out of the dock and then use it as a handheld device. So it's a little bit of a different experience. It's a much less powerful console because everything is in the tablet component that you stick into the dock. So you're not going to get the same kind of graphical experience, but there's still a lot of, I would say, worthwhile experiences. And especially if you value flexibility, being able to play on the go, although you're probably not going very many places these days. If you just like, playing in bed before going to sleep, or, say your significant other wants to watch something on the TV, well, now you can take the console with you and go play it elsewhere in your home.
Right. So a couple caveats on the Switch I think that are important. One is you might not be able to play every big game that comes out. I know we talked about that with PlayStation and Xbox, where you could pretty much get, if a new big game comes out, it's pretty much coming to those two. That's not always true for Nintendo, but on the other end of it, there's a lot of Nintendo games that only come to Nintendo. So I think you're going to know pretty quick if that's the spot for you when it comes to the Switch. If you enjoy those Nintendo games, that's where you're only going to find them pretty much. There's some imitators out there for sure on the other consoles, but if you're looking for that kind of experience of I want to be there, I want to be playing Zelda, I want to be playing Mario, that's pretty much where you're only going to find them. But the trade-off there is that you're going to miss a lot of the other stuff that the other consoles are enjoying on both of them.
You're going to miss a lot of big budget zeitgeisty games if that's your only console. What a lot of people do, and again, I don't recommend this if you're a first timer, is they get both an Xbox or a Switch or a PlayStation and a Switch.
Right.
There are a lot of people who do that, and they use the Switch as kind of a secondary gaming device. What I would say is a Switch is a good primary gaming device if you have a family, because there are a lot of kid-friendly games on the Switch, and they tend to be higher quality kid-friendly games than you might get on other platforms.
Right.
They're not like what the industry term is shovelware for games that are just kind of shoveled out the door. You can get a high quality experience that the whole family can enjoy.
Right. And I would say this, that I think there's some of the pros and cons on the family part of it too, or even, it tends to be the kind of a console where you can jump in and play a lot of games kind of multiplayer style, or they have a way for that second person to play, but it's not always the same experience for both people. So, I mean, kind of go into that knowing that, if you're going to be playing with your kids, there's going to be a lot of times where you're the one doing the fun stuff and he's the one collecting the stars or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know how to describe it. I don't want to get too into it, but the Switch has really cool features and abilities and games that you can't get anywhere else. But I think, like Merv said, in my mind, it's always almost like an augment. Like it's a Nintendo machine that also adds stuff into it. But sometimes it's hard for me to play long, extended sessions with it undocked. I find the controllers super uncomfortable, the ones it comes with. I had to buy the Pro controller. I don't think it's designed for long sessions as a standalone console. And the TV it works fine.
Yeah.
So
it really depends from person to person. Like I find it perfectly comfortable, but I understand. Like I can see why it's uncomfortable for certain people. Like depending on how your fingers and hands are shaped, it can probably be like it's not a lightweight thing to be just like holding for long periods of time.
Maybe like if I describe maybe like if you held your tablet and your phone at the same time, like that, it's kind of that like kind of have weight to it.
It has quite a bit of quite a bit of heft because there's a lot of silicon packed into a pretty small device.
Right.
But as I think go ahead. Oh, I was just saying, as Kappa was mentioning, there are games where you kind of like move around. So if you're into kind of like that whole novelty or motion control thing, you'll find some of it on the Switch. And if that's what you're into, then,
Yeah, and it works for the most part. It's not as goofy as the Wii was, if you have experience with that, where you're trying to, throw things around the room. Generally speaking, it works a little bit better.
The motion tracking is like an order of magnitude better than it was on the Wii. And they have like exercise games and stuff for the Switch. You might have heard of something called Ring Fit Adventure. That's the hot new exercise tool that's sold out everywhere. But once it's back in stock, if you want a fitness tool to go along with your gaming device, it's worth looking into.
Yeah, and I will also say, we were talking a little about online with Microsoft and PlayStation. I feel like Nintendo's online is awful. I don't know how else to really say it. I don't even think that hardcore Nintendo fans would agree that it's at least the worst of the three.
It's the worst of the. Okay. Here's what I'll say about someone who actually has Nintendo Online. If I had to use it for like actual online multiplayer gaming, I would get really frustrated. The other features, as far as like the entire online experience, I find the Nintendo Store a little bit easier to use than the other console stores.
Yeah, that's fair.
But like, I would only use I would not. If what you're looking to do is game online with your friends, the Switch is not where you would do that. There are certain online Switch experiences that are great, like say Tetris 99 or Splatoon 2. Those are fantastic experiences that you can have online on a Nintendo platform. But games that have online versions on multiple consoles are going to be much better experiences on the Xbox or the
Yeah,
PlayStation.
maybe let's circle around real quick and talk about, besides just kind of how the onlines are, let's talk about what they are and what they cost as well, because that's a good point. I think Nintendo Online, I would say, is probably the most optional of the three,
Yeah.
right? And I think that is, I bought it on a sale. I don't know if it's still going on, but I think they had a deal where if you bought 3 months, you got 6 months for free, and then you paid another 3 months. Wasn't that kind of how that one worked?
I
Um,
got a I got a weird deal where because I'm an Amazon Prime subscriber, they gave me a year of it for free.
yeah,
But I forget how much. I think it's something like $60 a year.
yeah. It's yeah. I think they have like a family membership as well. Let me look.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's 35 a year for a family membership. It's 20. It's a roughly 20 a month for an individual member. But there is a lot of little weird ins and outs with that one that are kind of past just the you know the the deals for Nintendo, especially online, are all over the place. You can get free weeks here, left, right, up and down. And similarly, Microsoft is kind of like that for Xbox. They have a couple different services now, Game Pass, and then Xbox Live. Is it still Xbox Live?
yes,
So I think Microsoft has kind of done this thing where they've merged their online service with a Game Pass service, which is, I don't want to say Netflix for games, but it's kind of Netflix for games, at least just for on the Microsoft side of it. They give you access to a big old library of games. Your Xbox Live's Games with Gold give you a free game, one or two free games a month. And they have a pretty good deal as far as Xbox, where you can get Xbox Live Gold or Xbox Game Pass if you use Microsoft points and redeem them online. So if you set Bing as your search engine, if you search certain things within Xbox, you earn points towards getting more Xbox Live Gold time. I think it's available in 3, 6, and 12 months, I think. It's about $60 a year though for Xbox Live Gold. Game Pass is another $14.99 on top of that. So those can add up pretty quick, but I do think Game Pass itself is a fantastic deal. Um,
yeah. As for the PlayStation side, I can't really speak to that because I use my PlayStation exclusively offline. I don't play any online games on my PlayStation. It's only connected to the internet to download patches.
yeah, PSN Plus, I would say, is probably the second best. Uh, PlayStation used to do free online for all their games. You didn't have to have the equivalent of Xbox Live Gold when last generation happened, but PlayStation started slowly to add more and more features to PlayStation Plus that allow you now that you basically a requirement to even play online at this point. They give you the two free games a month, just like Microsoft, but instead of giving you something like Game Pass along with it, you just get discounts, which isn't bad, but I would rather take that $14.99 and get access to all the games rather than a discount to it. So I feel like it's a good middle ground. And you get a good amount of free games that as long as you keep your PlayStation PSN Plus account active, you can keep those free games. If you let it lapse, those games go away. But like I said, it's kind of not optional for PlayStation if you plan to play online, as well as, do a lot of stuff that you
Yeah.
will end up getting PSN Plus.
Yeah, that's the one thing that we should emphasize. All these consoles, playing online costs extra.
Yeah.
And I should also mention that the Switch Online service does include some free games with it, but they're all retro games from Nintendo's back catalog.
I can't own another version of Super Mario 3. I'm just, I think I've got like 50 versions of it. So
It's the only version of it I own. I don't know
really,
how that's happened. It's because I've never owned a Nintendo
I've
console
got
before.
like anniversary editions, like, you know what I mean? Like at some point, I just feel like yeah. Um, I guess it's time to talk about the King. PC gaming, right?
Right. Just before we get into PC gaming, we mentioned two platforms that we're not going to get into big detail on. One of them is streaming. You might have heard of uh, Google's Stadia platform, which is a little bit difficult to explain, but essentially what it does is it allows you to use Google's cloud computing technology to not have like a local machine that's processing the game. It's being processed in the cloud somewhere else, and then the results are streaming to you on your screen. So you don't need like a huge hefty device to play in your home. But the technology is fairly new. It's a fairly new thing. We don't really know how it's going to shake out. And the business model, to be honest, is not the greatest.
Hmm.
So at this point, if you're getting into gaming, I'd kind of recommend you actually don't get into
Yeah,
streaming.
it's not a good entry point, especially if you don't already own the games. For the NVIDIA Shield portion of it, but I'm sorry, GeForce Now. But Stadia itself, I feel like is kind of half baked, and they're looking to test it out and beta test it. And you don't want to be the one who's caught, you know, investing in that being your only way of playing games. If you do get into it, this would be something more down the road that if you find you really enjoy it, then you look into it because, yeah.
Yeah, we'll see how the technology is very new. It could change the industry, but for now, we would caution against kind of
Hmm.
staying away from it. The other thing you might have heard of are platforms called the Nintendo 3DS and the PlayStation Vita. Those were dedicated handheld consoles. They kind of some 3DS is still receiving like a couple of new releases here and there, but really both those platforms are not really alive anymore. And
Yeah,
if you really want to play handheld games, the Switch is now kind of the way to go.
yeah, I would say if all you're looking for is to kill time on a bus or something, probably not right now, obviously, but that's kind of where the 3DS still might make its money. But you have to understand that you're only playing whatever is available out right now, and while there is a healthy back catalog for the 3DS, it's pretty much dead. So
Yeah,
yeah.
you're not getting like new zeitgeisty
Mhm.
games on that platform.
Right.
There are also like a lot of you. We should mention that there's not just mindless clicker games on phones now. There are actual
Yeah,
full fledged
you sure
video
about
games that you can find on iOS and Android. I personally don't know too much about them.
yeah.
Apple just launched a new service called Apple Arcade that has some cool stuff. If you don't want to buy a dedicated gaming device, it's something you could look into, but it's not going to have like the biggest zeitgeisty titles for
Yeah,
sure.
it's tough. I mean, mobile games almost always have like you might start enjoying it and then you start to realize what the hook is or how they're making the money or whatever. There's very few games that you play, that are free that are not going to do that. But you can still buy actual games on it, so they're usually just a couple years old at that point. But I will say, if you plan on getting into mobile gaming at any level, I would at least recommend buying a Bluetooth controller as well as one of those little stands that hold your phone. Over time, I feel like if you're going to be playing, phone games for any amount of time, that thing will pay for itself really, really quick. Um, it's just a lot easier way to hold it and to hang on to it and stuff like that, and not worry about messing up your phone or dropping it or things like that. So, I really recommend that.
Absolutely. Okay, let's dig into PCs because this
Yeah,
is where things. This is kind of both where Kappa and I are I guess most comfortable.
yeah.
Kappa's more of a hardware expert than I am because I don't actually build my own PCs.
Well, the number
But
one
they're
thing.
kind of.
Yeah,
Sorry,
go
go
ahead.
ahead. I was going to say there you have four options here,
Hmm.
and I'm just going to enumerate them, and then we're going to kind of explain what they are. You can buy all the components and assemble your PC yourself. You can order what's called a PC building kit, which usually comes with every important component except for a graphics card, which then you would buy separately and slot in yourself. You can order a custom built machine from a PC building house like CyberPower PC or iBuyPower, or you can buy a pre built model. The most famous company that makes this is a is a label of Dell called Alienware, and those are kind of your options for
Yeah. And
making a PC.
don't let people gatekeep you and make you feel like you have to build your own. I mean, it's fun to do. It's easier than you might think, and it's less expensive. But all those things aside, if you're just looking to get into it, you know, pre-built is an option. Just don't let people make you feel like that's like a worse way to do it. Um, I sometimes can come off that way when people are talking about buying a PC that they intend to game with. But my thing is probably this. Um, if you're just looking for something that works, do this. But there's a lot of videos that show you kind of the corners that get cut to make those games cheap, or to make those PCs cheap for you. And it's stuff that if you did it yourself, you'd pay less and you'd get a better product. So just keep in mind that there's a reason people say stuff like that to you, to consider building your own. If you've got any kind of familiarity with almost anything electronics, at least consider that option. It's not as scary. There's people who will help you. There's lots of people who like to do it and help you. So don't be scared off of that. But past that, PCs themselves right now are where everything's going, I feel like, in a way. Consoles are becoming more PC. PCs are getting better. They're getting more access to the console games than the other way around. So PC is a really strong option right now if you're just looking to get into gaming.
Yeah, like Kappa said, it's not as hard as it might sound to build your own PC, and like the cost difference on like buying the components versus ordering like a kit and slotting something in is not that much, and then ordering a custom built machine, the cost difference is less than you might think.
Mm-hmm.
Go with, if you do order a custom built machine, go with like a reputable PC builder that does quite a bit of volume. My experiences with iBuyPower and CyberPower PC have largely been positive, so I don't feel uncomfortable recommending them. There are smaller PC building houses where you might get a cheaper machine, but they're not as reputable because they don't do the same amount of volume and they don't have the same kind of brand reputation. So you do have to be a little careful if you go for a smaller building house.
And even if you're looking at either one of the smaller or the bigger ones, the two things I tell you is, one, have somebody who knows a little bit about it. Look at what the components of it are and run the math for you. Make sure that it makes out that you should be getting what you pay for. And two, even when you get it, make sure that you got what you paid for. The internet is rife with videos of people ordering these things and thinking they're paying for a 1080 Ti, but actually getting a 1070, which is a $400 difference, and it's sometimes an innocent mistake and they sent you the wrong thing, or sometimes it's, yeah, we charged you for something that was way better and you didn't get it. And they're hoping that you don't know. So always at least check that out. Not to scare you away, but it's just smart consumerism to make sure that you're getting what you paid for, and then knowing what you paid for up front. I bought my wife a pre-built, it's an HP Omen. This is pretty good, for the price and stuff. But even that, it came with a weird version of a 1060 I hadn't seen anywhere else, and I don't even think is commercially available, that has a little bit less memory. Now, they were upfront about it and it said it on the box. I just hadn't seen, a scaled down memory version of it before. So things like that are something that if you do know someone who knows about PCs, even if you see me and Merve, obviously we can help you, but ask those questions up front, so that, you don't get into an area where, you paid a little bit too much for something that wasn't as good as you thought it was.
Yeah, it helps, especially on PC building sites. They'll list components not just by generally what they are, but the specific brand and model number. And that way, the sites that list those, I think, are a little more reputable because they're telling you exactly what they're putting in your machine.
Right.
Versus sites that are a little bit vague
Yep.
about what they're going to be putting in there. Which is, again, why I say, CyberPower and iBuyPower both do this. But again, not all sites do this. You have to be a little careful. Another option that's available to you, if you're looking to buy a PC once lockdown is over, check out your local PC enthusiast store. sometimes they can be pretty helpful. Sometimes they'll kind of take you for a ride. But if they have a good reputation, then it's worth talking to people there as well.
So now that we've probably scared you all away, no, PC gaming right now is in a really good spot. Even if you're just looking to play almost everything, it's on PC. The consoles are there. You've got a weird situation right now where there's a lot of storefronts, and there's kind of a battling for what used to be a monopoly, which is Steam. And you're seeing a little bit more of other companies kind of creep in, and also the developers themselves trying to get into the market. So it's an opportunity right now to get a lot of good games, even free or very cheap. So if you're looking to build up a library quick, you can do that very easily and for very little money. So when you're talking software-wise and you're not looking to buy used games or anything like that, right now, if you're looking to get into gaming and you just want to kind of dabble and feel what fits you best, PC is a really strong option for that. I feel like it's rare that I don't look at a sale or a list of free games even and find two or three that I'm really interested in and want to play. And usually you find little gems here and there too that you didn't even think you'd like.
Yeah, so let's actually talk about that. Let's talk about where you get software.
Mm-hmm.
So consoles, it's pretty simple. Like Kappa mentioned, each console has its own dedicated storefront. You can download games from there. But consoles also take physical media. Discs in the case of the PlayStation and Xbox, cartridges in the case of the Switch. You'd usually buy those at an electronics store. At this point, you're probably ordering online from Best Buy or Amazon.
Right.
PC gaming basically just doesn't use physical media anymore. Some older games you can still get on DVDs, but that's more or less done now.
Yeah,
and pretty much everything is downloaded from the internet.
Right.
So the main storefront is Steam, but there are other storefronts as well. There's the Epic Game Store, which is managed by Epic Games, and the other big one is Origin, which is managed by Electronic Arts.
Right. Yeah. And then you've got little side stores like Good Old Games, GOG, that is owned by CD Projekt. It's just CD Projekt, right? Not CD Projekt Red.
Yeah, Red is the developer.
Yeah.
Project is the wider company, I believe.
Right. EA runs their own store. Ubisoft runs their own store. Blizzard Activision runs their own store. So there's a lot out there in terms of, options if you're just looking for ways to like get into it. But I would tell people the main thing that I would look for in a game store or whatever is just be willing to shop for deals. Don't lock yourself into a garden like I feel like a lot of maybe PC gamers did early on. Just said, I'm a Steam guy, I only use Steam, for example. No, be willing to use what's out there, and you'll get the most out of your buck for sure. If you're willing to like look at these different launchers, basically, because that's all they are at this point. They just launch the games a little bit differently. If you're willing to kind of put up with 5, 6, 7 of them, you can get a lot of free games and a lot of cheap games by doing that.
Yeah, the one that gives you, like, if you are an Amazon Prime subscriber,
Mm-hmm.
you're also, for at no additional charge, a Twitch Prime subscriber. And Twitch Prime every month, or like every other month, gives you free games that you can download to the Twitch client and launch from there.
Yep. And then, I mean, Epic, like we mentioned, always giving out free games. Steam is always giving out free games. Steam has multiple times a year really big sales. There's a site called Humble Bundle, which will not only give you very, very cheap games and very, like, good new games, but it also takes part of what you pay for them and donates it to charity. So if you're just looking to kind of just jump right in and find lots of things, there is a gray market as well. I use some of them. I'm not going to lie. When I say gray market, it's not like I'm going to the dark web or anything, but there's some sites that resell keys to the game because you don't necessarily need to buy the game. You just need to buy the license key to it. So you can find some resellers who, for whatever reason, get their hands on some of these keys and resell them. So yeah, keep that in mind. That if you're looking if you got to play the new Doom, you can probably find it somewhere with at least 15% off because somebody bought more keys than they thought they should have.
Yeah, I should mention that there are kind of two tiers of key sellers.
Mm-hmm.
There are key sellers that mostly get their keys publisher direct. So that would be
Green Man
places like
Gaming.
Green Man Gaming is the big one. The other big one is the unfortunately named Gamers Gate. You might have heard of something that sounds similar
Unaffiliated.
that we're just not going to talk about right now.
Yeah.
So those are kind of the big ones that get their keys publisher direct, and there's also a gray market, as Kappa mentioned, best exemplified by the somewhat sketchy, let's say, G2A.
Right. Yeah. And if you don't trust them, don't use them. And I would never spend more than $10 at any time, because there's a chance that the key you get doesn't work. So it sucks, but sometimes you just got to take that chance. And usually it's because they buy the key from other people who bought the key or stole the key from somebody else, and then the developers will make those keys not work. It's a whole thing, but you're safe buying on Steam or any number of places. But if you're looking for deals and you see some sites that just almost seem too good to be true, don't drop $200 there. Maybe do a couple purchases and see how they work out.
Yeah, I would say Green Man Gaming, Gamersgate are the reputable ones.
I would agree too.
But there are other stores out there that are less reputable. Also, Impulse, which is operated by GameStop,
Right.
It's also
Yeah.
reputable. But outside of that, things get a little sketchy. So, Direct to Drive as well, but they're bad for other reasons. So we don't have to get into that. Those are kind of the more reputable ones, and then steer clear of the gray market unless you're willing to take a gamble.
There's some good sites too. I would recommend, if there's a particular game you really want to play, if all your friends are, hardcore, Destiny fans or FIFA players or Madden heads or whatever, and you want to jump in and get into gaming and play with them, there's a lot of good sites out there that'll kind of inform you like what the minimum specs you need for a PC are. So keep that in mind. It's not like you have to go in blind, or it's not like you have to buy top of the line if you're just looking to ride out this quarantine and get a $700, $800 computer that maybe you'll do more with down the line. But at the same time, it's an entry point where you don't have to come out of pocket as hard if you're just looking to play one or two things with your friends.
There are two tools that I recommend every PC gamer get familiar with. One is Can You Run It?
Yeah.
It's canyourunit.com.
Can I Run It, I think is what it is. Yeah.
Can I Run It?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's one of the two. We'll put it in the link dump for y'all. And that'll tell you whether or not your PC meets the minimum and the recommended system requirements for a game. And there's How Long to Beat, which tells you how long a game will take you to complete. And those are two really great resources. A third great resource is something called the PC Gaming Wiki. Some games behave weirdly on certain systems or with certain software configurations. And this website will document all those kind of weird cases. It'll tell you where the game save files are in case you need to pull them out or transfer them to another PC, things like that.
Yeah. Right now, the specs aren't as bad as they have been. So you can usually find what you need exactly. You can click on the game, and there used to be a recommended and a minimum. I'm seeing far less of the minimum specs now released with most games, and they're just saying this is what you need. And you see a lot more of the recommended versus the minimum versus the high end. So I think that's a good way to kind of break into it, though, is to just look at what you're trying to play and then go from there.
Yep. And one more last mention of software stores. Most of these places are places where you buy like the latest and greatest big games. Steam also has a lot of smaller titles or independent games, as does the Epic Game Store. If you want a store that specializes in indie games, there's a store called itch.io, and a lot of independent developers will put their games up on there for a couple of bucks. So if you want to support independent developers, it's also a great place to check out.
So good news is that Can I Run It, Can You Run It, and Can We Run It has all been bought out by System Requirements Lab. So if you're looking there, systemrequirementslab.com is what the new version of that is, I guess. The consolidated conglomerate, I guess.
Just buying up every pronoun.
Everybody can run it.
That's
so
I guess should we talk about which games you'd recommend or what you should think about when you're picking out games?
I mean, yes, I think we should, and I think that the number one thing that like I hope that you walked away from this is that the game you're going to get the most fun out of on anything, console, PC, or whatever, is games that you can play with people or at least talk to people about. Obviously, on the Avocado, you're more than welcome. There's multiple game threads and stuff, and a podcast I hear. But you know, always consider that that's kind of like that's your entrance point. If you're just getting into gaming, the most fun game isn't, it might not be the one that's got, all nines and tens on reviews and that you hear people talking about all the time. If Dark Souls was your first game, you'd probably, walk away screaming. But I don't know, maybe you'd be into it. But at the same time, if you know people who are into certain games and they're the ones kind of pushing you in that direction, that's kind of a good entrance way, I would say. So always consider what they're into or what you think they're into first, and then after that we'll give you some ideas of where to start.
Yeah, I would say, like, even if it's not a multiplayer game, just having stuff to talk about with other people is fun.
Right.
So, like, if your friends are playing something and they say it's cool, like, worst comes to worst, you have something you can talk about with them.
Right.
So, like, if they're recommending something, it's probably pretty good.
Yeah. And even if it's not, you can say, what the hell are you saying?
Friendship over. Like, Kappa and I, we get along pretty well. We have very different tastes in games, but we like talk about games with each other all the time. And we overlap more than you might think in what we like. But we
like movies or anything else. I think, eventually you sort of say, okay, well, this person's opinions on this align with mine, and then on other things they don't, and you just got to respect, okay, not everything's going to be for everybody, especially in video games, because you're talking a lot of time investment, right? And everybody values their time differently. I think that's fair to say. So, a game that to someone is too grindy and therefore they're bored with it fast versus me who loves to grind out for top tier gear, it's going to have a different feeling. So,
and everybody gets into different genres. Like, I'm super into like puzzle games. And I think Kappa's like super into strategy games.
Right.
And we're like different on that regard, but we're both super into like action RPGs. Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we like, people will overlap in different ways. People will have different preferences, and it's all good stuff. So, don't be discouraged if like your friend's super into, strategy games and you really want to shoot people in the face.
Right.
Those are just two equally valid but great preferences that you can have. So don't be ashamed of liking what you like. I think there's sort of like two gateways that people normally recommend into like as like a starter game. One is like, people say this is how they get their significant others into games. They like play like low skill narrative focused games, especially games where you make choices. You're both kind of sitting on the couch together. You ask your significant other, "Hey, what choice did I make there?" And it becomes a participatory experience. Some people say they get people into games that way, and that I think does work for some people. My recommendation, I think, is a little bit against the conventional wisdom, and it's think about what you would like to do, and then find a good game where you can do that.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
So like
the way I explained it to, my wife sometimes will come over. She's just getting into it as well. And she'll say, wow, you got a lot of Steam game installed. And I say, it's kind of like a mood for me sometimes, right? Like a different mood will hit me and I feel like sneaking around and shooting guys, or I feel like building an empire, or I feel like, and when that mood hits, that's kind of the game that you can be in. So if you find yourself being like the kind of person who watches movies based on what mood you're in, that might be kind of where you're at too, so maybe you need a lot of things from a lot of different genres to feel like you're getting the whole experience versus someone who says, I love sci-fi movies, and you can just play sci-fi games and just be happy. You don't need that genre, spanning type library.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I go through like months where I don't want to play a certain genre, and then I'll be like, oh man, I haven't played an RPG in forever. I should go fire one up. RPG stands for role-playing game, by the way. So like, do you want to just like throw out some recommendations? Just see, just to give a kind of guide for what people
Yeah,
might
sure.
enjoy. So if you're like super into puzzles, if you really like solving puzzles, a good game that you can play on most platforms nowadays is Portal.
Hmm.
It's a game that involves making magic doors and walls and walking through them to solve puzzles, which sounds a little silly, but you can the way you position doors might allow you to use to get up to a platform that you couldn't otherwise reach, and or obtain an object that you couldn't otherwise obtain. And using that to solve puzzles is actually kind of nifty. It's also a really funny game,
Hmm.
so if you like laughing and solving puzzles,
And it's got a lot of iconic things that happen in it, not to spoil it, but it's definitely that kind of game where if you played it and you're just looking to get into gaming, you can learn some of the lingo and catch up pretty quick.
oh
Um,
yeah, you will understand about five more
yeah,
memes if you play
exactly.
that game.
Yep.
So I recommend it.
Yeah. Puzzle
If you
game.
really
Oh,
like
go ahead.
just I was gonna say if you really like exploring quirky worlds,
Mhm.
a couple of games. If you have a Nintendo console, if you have a Nintendo Switch, Super Mario Odyssey is great for that. If you don't have a Nintendo console, then there's a game called A Hat in Time that's available on most other platforms. And these are games where they're called platformers, where you jump from platform to platform in themed worlds, almost like theme park worlds,
Mhm.
but with moving parts and like cartoon enemies that you bash or jump on. They can be really fun.
Yeah, what I'd recommend is Stanley Parable, which shows up on sale a lot of times. And if you've seen the movie Stranger Than Fiction, it's kind of like that. It's a game where there is an omniscient narrator that you can choose to or to not obey to his consternation. And I think that's kind of a quirky game that I think a lot of people really enjoy when they're starting to get into kind of that narrative style game.
Yeah, it's especially fun if like I would say it's a really good second game or
Mhm.
third game to play. So if you've played a couple of games and you want a palate cleanser that kind of messes with you a bit, Stanley Parable's a lot of fun.
Yep.
So say you want to be a badass and shoot people, what would you recommend?
Oh, you know what I'm going to recommend already. A little game called
Yeah.
Destiny, free to play right now. No, Destiny
I
might
thought you
be.
were gonna say Halo.
Oh, absolutely. Well, Halo's it's kind of the same. But yeah, Halo and Destiny, I think, are kind of where the shooting genre right now reaches a spot where I think your common answers are going to be your Call of Duties and things like that. But Battlefield and Call of Duty speak a very specific language, I feel like, and you either understand it or you don't, and it can be really intimidating to get into it. So I would say somewhere like a Bungie or a 343, which are Halo and Destiny shooters, kind of split the middle. Another good one would be Borderlands, where you can kind of take it on your own pace and you can build up and you can build some a character that feels like an ultimate badass, but you don't have to do it in a way where you're constantly butting heads against other badasses who have been being badasses for 20 years now in some of those series and just killing you the second they see you. So I would definitely recommend, if you're looking to get into gaming, to find a shooter that has a world outside of a co-op I'm sorry, competitive venue.
I would say a really, really good gateway shooter is Halo
Sure.
because it's extremely simple, and I don't mean that in a bad way,
Mhm.
but you understand its language immediately
Yep.
when you start playing it. It's like
It's just the right amount of superhero versus, vulnerable for a lot of people, where you learn well enough what's going to kill you and what isn't, and you have those moments where you can run into a room and destroy everything and walk out the other side, and you have those moments where it's really tense because you can do the math, and things aren't looking good for you. So yeah, I think that Halo knows exactly what it wants to do, and it does it extremely well.
if you want something that's a little bit more like a movie experience, and you really hate Nazis, as you should, then Wolfenstein: The New Order is also a game I'd recommend. It's a little more old school than these games. It has a lot of elements from older first-person shooters, but it's also a lot of fun, and
Yeah.
it has a mode that makes it a little easier. If you really, really want to play through a movie, I would recommend the Uncharted
Yep.
series.
I mean, you are playing Dude Raider. Is that what they called it when it first came out?
Yeah, they
Dude
call
Raider.
it Dude Raider, but they also called Lara Croft. Is there like a let's like the female Indiana
Yeah,
Jones. Is
yeah.
there like a snappy name for that? So it's just like kind of circling back.
You're
It's
definitely
basically an
playing
Indiana Jones
an
game.
Indiana Jones game. Two I would maybe recommend would be Red Dead Redemption, which is your kind of your classic Western tale that maybe does drag on a little bit long, but if you're looking for that kind of experience, it's not something you can get anywhere else. And then the Metro series, which is kind of a post-apocalyptic, very gritty, dark, grim world set in kind of an Eastern European. Scramble to get by type lifestyle. It feels like a movie in very large parts because I think it's based on a very popular book series. So you're getting a lot of that actually like handed to you. But it's a good series if you're just looking to live that movie experience.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's a series that I kind of want to get into, and it's kind of passed me by.
Mhm.
But it's received a lot of praise,
Yeah.
so check it out if that sounds appealing to you. If you want to like zip around really fast in an environment and like do super cool parkour moves, I'd recommend a game called Titanfall 2.
Yeah.
And I know it sounds like, wait, you're recommending me the sequel? The first game doesn't in the series doesn't have a story. It's just a multiplayer game. The second game in the series does have a story and has a single player campaign, and it is super neat.
Yeah, it's a game that there still is a multiplayer component to it, but even if you just play the single player, you'll definitely feel like you got your money's worth. It's a very fun, complete experience.
Yeah, so especially if you want to both shoot people and move around really fast, I don't think there's a better experience out
Mhm.
there.
Yeah,
So say you want to, say you really like you're stuck inside, you really want to explore the city that you not necessarily the city that you live in, but you want to explore a city. There are a whole genre of games that are like sandbox games set in cities. Like you've probably heard of the Grand Theft Auto series. So Grand Theft Auto 5 is one that a lot of people enjoy. There's also slightly more obscure ones. There's one I really like called Sleeping Dogs, which is set in Hong Kong.
hmm
And if you want something wackier but still set in a city, there's the Saints Row series.
yep. And I would also include some of the Assassin's Creed series if you're looking for that kind of not modern day city, obviously, but if you're looking to kind of virtually tour some areas, that series does a lot with architecture and history and things like that, where you can almost feel like you're living that life in some ways. I really
You want to
enjoyed that.
walk around like Renaissance France,
Yeah.
there is a game that you can do that in. It's
Yep.
called Assassin's Creed Unity. Yeah, and it actually has I think was it Origins or Odyssey that has history mode, which
Yeah,
is completely
actually, both of them
non-violent.
do. Yep. So you just tour the history, and then you play it as almost like an NPC character, non-playable character. So you're not playing as the cool killer in the rest of the game, and you kind of walk through it. And as you go through it, you're they say this is what the average peasant would have experienced. This is what the average noble would have experienced, and you get to kind of feel like the city is alive at that point. They say that all the time in movies and things like that, but in a game, it feels so much better because you can see what the average civilian or the noble would have went through and how different those lives could have been.
Yeah, you can actually like walk around in their shoes, which is and like we don't talk about it enough because we're so used to it, but it's super cool.
hmm it really is. It's one of those things when you see a vista kind of come up, you can really be like, wow, this they put a lot here and this looks amazing. And the work there is phenomenal in some of them.
Oh, like I still like every time I see a pretty thing in a game, I hit the F12 key on the
Yeah.
keyboard. F12 is the keyboard command for taking a screenshot in games that you launch from Steam.
Yep.
For those of you who are unaware, so like, especially if you're getting into gaming for the first time, I think all three major consoles now also have a screenshot button. I know PS4 and Switch do. Xbox has it as well.
hmm Yeah.
Yeah, so they all have like a screenshot button, And like if you're getting into game for the first time, you're going to be seeing a lot of pretty or really cool art. You're going to be hitting that button a lot.
Yep.
So other things like say you're super into sci-fi and you want to be a badass exploring the galaxy, I really think the Mass Effect series is good for that.
Absolutely.
Cap and I are both huge fans. If you would like to be a superhero, I would recommend two games that are a little bit older but still really great: Batman Arkham Asylum and Batman Arkham City.
Yep. Yeah.
They're
I'd
more
also maybe
recent games.
recommend the Spider-Man game if you're going
Oh yeah,
indie.
this the Spider-Man PS4 game,
Yep.
which I haven't played. Wait, you've played that one, right?
Yes, I have. Yeah.
Yeah. It's very similar, except for you get to be a wisecracking badass instead of a brooding
Yeah,
badass.
exactly. It's which kind of badass you want to be in that case.
Yeah. Which kind of stupid suit do you want to wear?
Exactly. Not the hockey dads.
And you might have heard, Kappa mentioned earlier that there are lots of games you can sneak around and be a badass. One I really like is Dishonored, but there are other stealth games out there as well. I think, do you like Splinter Cell?
Yeah, I do. I think Splinter Cell, its probably last three entries were very strong. But it's a hard series to get into if you're not willing to invest in the Clancy verse at this point. So if you're willing to just ignore the story and be willing to be a super sneaky spy, it's a really fun game. But if you feel like you're going to get lost in the story, I would say steer clear.
Okay. In that case, Dishonored is a great experience.
Yeah.
And you have the ability to be stealthy, or if you really just want to stab people, it's also a game where you can just stab people loudly.
Yeah. Two ones I would like to suggest.
Oh yeah. Please.
If you're into like if you've always wanted to be like a starship captain or a space captain, I recommend the game Elite Dangerous. I'm sure.
Oh yeah.
It's an open sandbox, which means there's no real point to the game. The idea is that you just basically spend your time enjoying the game for what it is and building the things that you want to build and buying the things you want to buy. So if that's going to be a little bit too free form for you, it might not be a good thing. But the game just kind of looses you out or looses you in space to buy, sell, trade, be a pirate, steal, mine asteroids, whatever you want to do. The game's going to let you do it. So that's when I recommend if you always had that itch to be a starship captain. There's another game that card collector games I think kind of are a gateway into gaming. So if you're familiar with card games and you're looking to kind of see what you can do gaming wise out there, there's a pretty interesting series called the Hand of Fate series that kind of combines card games with RPGs. And so if you're familiar with either, there's a lot of chance and luck and stuff, but there's some smart ways about not necessarily building your deck, but in the order you play your cards that I think really kind of shows you a fun way to experience that. But there are online versions of Magic the Gathering and stuff like that too if you're still a card collector and looking for the one-to-one deck builder type games.
Oh yeah, absolutely. There's like a whole bunch of games out there that take principles from tabletop games and put them into video games. There's a whole genre of, let's say, more old school role playing games that take a lot of cues from tabletop role playing games and just like animate them essentially.
Absolutely. And for you werewolf heads, there are online versions of Werewolf you play with other people. I think one's called Town of Salem. And there is another one. So if you really enjoy the werewolf experience and want to figure out how that works online, there are versions of that for you to get into.
And there's also a game on Steam called Tabletop Simulator that essentially allows you to play a whole wide variety of board games with people online.
It's almost a construction kit for board games as much as it is. It's impressive stuff.
Yeah, people have made all sorts of extensions to the game called mods. There's a whole bunch of custom extensions that have a whole bunch of popular board games in there.
Right.
Or non-proprietary versions of popular board games, I should say.
Just close enough.
Yeah. Just it's like the WickDonald's of board games. There's a lot of that in there. So if you want to play some equivalent of like, I don't know, Avalon or Love Letter or any other popular party game in there.
Yep.
It's probably in there. Oh yeah, one more thing. There's a whole genre of like city builder and park builder games out there. You've always wanted to like fancied yourself like a city architect, or like you really into like rides and roller coasters. So as far as city building, there's a game called City Skylines that's really popular. And for park building, there are two games. One, if you're more focused on like the sandboxy experience, there's a game called Planet Coaster. One, if you're really into like the idea of managing and running a park, there's a game called Parkitect.
Yep.
And they're both really good.
Yeah, it's a good time to be a Sims player as well. I think they've got pretty regular Sims games and expansions coming out. So even if you want to just sim someone else's life who can leave the house, you got a chance to do it right now.
Oh yeah, and one more thing we mentioned: sandboxes. A game you've almost certainly heard of, Minecraft, still going strong.
Yeah.
So if you want to hang out in a sandbox and build cool shit, and I guess fight zombies.
Yeah.
There's zombies in that, right?
Yeah, I mean, kind of. Yeah, you
There's
more
sort of zombies in that.
less fight and more run away, at least for most of it. So.
Okay, if you want to build stuff with blocks and fight zombies, Minecraft is still around and it's still super popular.
Absolutely, more popular than ever.
Yeah, it's nuts. That thing has been popular for like a decade.
Yeah, absolutely. It has its time where it comes and goes but it never really leaves the public conscious for some reason. It's always just kind of out on the fringes until someone pulls it back in, a streamer or something else.
Oh, the most recent thing I saw is that people were like recreating banned books in a library, in like a virtual library inside Minecraft.
Yep.
Which is the weirdest thing on the planet, but also super cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so people do all sorts of crazy stuff with Minecraft, and it's still incredible.
Yeah.
Okay, and I guess lastly, for newcomers to gaming, what we want to answer is like, how do I actually play a game? So like most games on console, it's like really self-explanatory. Just like press start
right
when when you have your cursor hovered over the icon. And most games will just like, gone are the days of having to open an instruction manual to figure out how to play a game.
Yep.
Nowadays, most games will teach you how to play them when you fire them up. One thing that might not be immediately explained to you that we should point out is the convention for modern three-dimensional video games is that the left thumbstick on your controller moves your character and the right thumbstick moves your camera.
Right.
This can usually be reconfigured in most games if you're like left-handed or something, but that's generally the standard.
Yeah, and be prepared to mess with some of the settings right off the bat to make sure that things are exactly how you want them. They really let you reconfigure exactly what you want. So if you find yourself always hitting the wrong button, instead of trying to fight that urge at the beginning, instead just change that button to whatever you want. Most games are pretty forgiving these days when it comes to that. If you've always played Mario and thought, man, B would be a better jump button than A, well, here's your chance. And most games are going to let you do that these days.
They're both the jump button.
Are they?
Yeah.
Wasn't one like a sprint?
In Mario.
Oh yeah, but I mean, yeah. Which one made you run faster, A or B?
Oh wait, I'm talking about the Switch, which has the 4 buttons.
I'm talking about Mario.
Oh, like old school Mario. Oh yeah, A is jump, B is run.
All right, there you go.
Okay, old school Mario. Yeah, I sometimes forget that Kappa and I have a significant age gap.
Jeez. But yeah, so besides just remapping, the other thing that remapping is changing the controls. The other thing is if you're just getting into, and you happen to get into PC gaming, if your new computer came with an SSD, an SSD is always going to load games faster. You don't want to necessarily fill up your SSD with games, though. What I always recommend to people who are first getting into it and have an SSD, you put your main game or the game that you find yourself playing or wanting to play the most on your SSD, so that'll lower your load times. Everything else can, generally speaking, be put on a hard drive. So even if you get into console gaming, some people will talk to you about getting an SSD. They all support them now. An SSD is the one peripheral that I think makes the biggest difference in load times that you'll notice. So games these days, they're big, They take a long time to load. If that annoys you, an SSD is the easiest way to kind of combat that. So it's a little bit more advanced maybe than some people might be familiar with. But if you get into a game like my wife did, and it's just annoying you how long things are taking, that's your fix.
Yeah, I would say like what I do is I put the games that I'm currently playing on my SSD,
Mm-hmm.
and when I'm done with them, if I might want to go back, say to like be a completionist, I just put them on my hard drive
Yep. Let them
afterwards,
sit there.
and let them sit there. Yeah, and I tend to put older games just directly on my hard disk drive because they don't need the lightning fast boot up
Sure.
time. They're going to boot up super fast anyway.
And one thing that new gamers might originally kind of worry about too, in that when we're talking about how do I play games, one of the good things right now is that games are almost always saved to your account or to the cloud. So if you beat something on your character, you're really proud of it. Generally speaking, if you're on an Xbox or a PlayStation game, that is going to apply to that as long as you don't delete your account or clear your account out. Most of the saves these days can be made to the cloud. If you find yourself playing a game in one place and you want to, eventually when this lockdown's over, go over to your friend's house and play that same thing over there, just make sure that you've got that option selected or checked so that you're saving to the cloud.
Yeah, I believe it's part of the online services that you pay for
Yep.
on Xbox, PlayStation, and Nintendo.
Right.
Yeah, it's Steam. It's part of. It comes for free with the platform. So that's one nice thing about PC is that you don't have to pay extra for cloud saves. It's right there. Oh yeah, one last thing about playing games. I forget what I was going to say. So let's move on.
That's not that.
Yeah. So let's actually talk about people who are returning to gaming after a long time away. Because I'm sure there are a lot of you who like played games when you were a teenager or when you were in college and had a lot of free time, and now you have a family or a busy job and you don't get as much time to game, or you wouldn't otherwise have much time to game if you weren't locked down at home.
Right.
So for a lot of you folks, you're probably familiar with some of the conventions of gaming, but some stuff has changed in the past decade or so. And let's kind of go over what's new and what's the same and kind of try to guide you folks. Sound good?
Yes.
All right, so I will give you the good news. The good news is that a lot of the games that you liked 10 years ago are available to you.
Yeah, and in multiple places too. You're not as stuck to what you were playing at that time.
Yeah, a lot of games that you loved 20 years ago, or sometimes even 30 years ago, are available for you to play now. Retro gaming is a huge thing, so a lot of them are just like on PC stores.
Yeah.
So
Be a little bit
go
prepared
ahead.
to tinker a little bit if you're running like a newer computer with Windows 10. Every now and then, if you're getting into really old games, you might have to do some additional things to get them up and running. But generally speaking, if you use a site like Abandonware or Good Old Games, GOG, which we previously mentioned, generally speaking, those games are going to have whatever they need to run on a modern computer. Otherwise, you're just going to be messing around with stuff like compatibility settings and things like that.
Yeah, most of the games actually, most of like the old DOS games, like come with their own built-in DOS
Right.
emulator.
Yeah. So you click a button, you're actually running in DOS, which is interesting. It used to be its own thing, but yeah, now it's kind of a cool way to do it. But just be aware that every now and then you have to actually sometimes with real old games purposely slow down your computer so that the game doesn't go, oh wow, there's no way anybody can have 16 gig of RAM and it shuts itself down. So, but it's a great time right now to be into retro gaming, or sometimes even what they call abandonware, which is games that nobody's really sure who has the copyright, so you can just literally go download it for free. So if you're looking for some blast from the past, there's a million of them out there.
Yeah, I'm still salty that No One Lives Forever is in legal limbo. But somebody's put it up online
Yeah.
to basically just download. And I'm not like pro piracy, but I consider this ethically safe to just
Yeah,
download.
no one's getting when the people who made it aren't getting paid anymore. For making it, it's kind of it's that weird area.
So yeah, another thing that's not really changed is that a lot of series that you enjoyed 10 years ago, they're still running.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to play like a Final Fantasy game or a Mario game or even a Tomb Raider game, there's a modern version of that you can play like right now.
Yep. And in a lot of ways they've become more complicated but more friendly. And I know that doesn't make sense until you've experienced it, but even something like a Tomb Raider, they've added 50 million layers onto it that weren't in the original ones. But as the game does a better job of getting you from point A to point B than just saying, go figure out how to kill this tiger, or something like that. The games in general understand that people might be coming into it, and they've done it in the way they fix it in a lot of ways is by having heavy tutorial systems. So don't feel like you can't just jump back in.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially if you haven't been playing for a while, you'll find that muscle memory just like will come back to you eventually. And there's a lot of like spiritual successors to stuff you might have enjoyed. Like if you were super duper into isometric RPGs back in the day, they had a resurgence a few years ago, and like now they're back up the wazoo.
Yep.
So
and
Pillars of Eternity, Tyranny, Division: Original Sin, Wasteland 3,
and
Wasteland 2, sorry,
and
3 isn't out yet.
I would really say that if that was your thing, an old school top down RPG or CRPG, Western RPG, whatever you want to call it, if that was your thing, this is your time to get back into it, because those series and those games that he named off are not just good spiritual successors; they're all timers. They deserve to be on the list with what inspired them. So. Of all the kind of recent trends that have kind of come back around, that one that is really been knocked out of the park by the people doing it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Other games that kind of have spiritual successors now, like if you remember old immersive sims from like Looking Glass and Ion Storm, there's Prey, Deus Ex got rebooted. They made a new Thief game, but it's garbage. But they also made Dishonored, which is great. So check that out. Park simulators we mentioned earlier still going strong. Planet Coaster, Parkitect.
Even stuff like 2 Points Hospital, Theme Hospital, Sim Hospital, those games like that. I mean, they're still out there doing their own thing.
Planet Zoo as well.
Yep,
absolutely.
And
they made a Jurassic Park game that's like Jurassic World Evolution. That's basically running your own Jurassic Park, which I think is really funny. Old school first-person shooters. Those are still alive, surprisingly.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, I mean, this Doom, that's all I've been seeing people play lately on. So, I mean, there's always a hunger for that style of, rip and tear shooter. So it's back, and I don't think it's going anywhere because it's really sold pretty well as far as what people have said. So it's not going anywhere, I don't think.
Yeah, absolutely. And point and click adventures are still like around as well. So if you remember old LucasArts games, there are point and click adventure games that are kind of in the same vein. So not too long ago, there's a game called Broken Age that was quite popular, and a lot of people got into. Another one called Thimbleweed Park, which a lot of people also appreciated. Do you remember any others? Sorry, my brain is not.
Well, I mean, even like some of the the Monkey Island got a reboot, if that was one of the things. There's been remasters, obviously, of some of those other LucasArts games.
Forgot Tales of Monkey Island. I love that.
But the Telltale series, I think, is probably the other. The Walking Dead and things like that. Though, I wouldn't go too far down that Telltale line, but definitely some of their earlier projects, were very well received. I would say probably the
first season of The Walking Dead was probably was really good.
Yeah, and then I think Wolf Among Us is another great one.
Oh yeah, that's they're making a sequel to that finally.
Absolutely, that was the good one. So I'm glad to hear that.
So a lot of stuff though has changed, right? So if you were gaming 10 years ago, you were probably, even if you were gaming on PC, you were probably like putting DVDs in your computer's optical disc drive. You don't do that anymore.
Nope.
Like, at all.
I don't even have an optical disc drive. And I literally just built a new computer, and it wasn't even something I even thought about. So, go on those days.
I actually had to specially, like when I built my PC, I actually had to specially get a case that had support for optical disc drives because I still buy CDs for music because I'm weird and old school. Otherwise, it's like not even included by default now in the most modern towers, and you have to kind of find ones that support it.
Yep.
So everything now is done via digital distribution in the PC space. And in console space, there's more digital distribution than ever. Basically, everything except for major titles on console is digitally distributed. Major titles are still mostly on discs or on cartridges.
And I think that even when you tend to buy a disc, you'll see this a lot. If there's a game that you really must have and you want to buy the collector's edition, be a little wary. A lot of times it will include all the, the knickknacks and stuff, but it won't include the game itself because they expect you to digitally download the game. That's kind of where we're at right now. So you'll get the statue or the hat or the T-shirt or the stickers or whatever and no game. So watch that if you're looking to get into it and you're looking at some of the collector's edition type stuff.
Yeah, sometimes it's really weird. They like the big console collector's editions just come with like a download code. And you're like, give me a damn disc.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm like a weird physical media junkie. So most people are cool with digital. So, you can get on board and it works for pretty much everything. Other things that have changed, monetization strategies of video games have changed somewhat in ways that I would say are not wholly bad, but that are not always the greatest. A lot of video games have microtransactions now, which are small, often recurring payments for things like skins or loot boxes that contain randomized gear.
It's a debate.
Editorialize too much. It's a debate within the industry. I think I would hesitate to say that Kappa and I feel like super positively about this. There are good points and bad points.
Yeah, but I think my stance would be, and I think maybe in line with there's a way to do it well. There's a way to do it poorly. And regardless, it's kind of just not going to go away. I think you can be the kind of person who maybe says, I'm not going to buy games with this period. But it would be difficult because almost every game has some form of, secondary market for the game itself. And it's up to you to choose how to use it. The best games aren't going to force it on you. That's kind of where I stand on it. If you feel like it's a pay to win, in other words, you got to buy things in order to win the game, that's probably the wrong way to do it. So.
Yeah, and I would say it has changed because video games used to cost $60 10 years ago, and they still cost $60 now, but we've also had a decade of inflation, and the price point didn't shift. So
and
that money's getting made up somewhere.
Yeah, if you think about it as kind of like, the people who are buying these skins and stuff are subsidizing your game still being cheap. I mean, maybe it makes you not as mad about it, but it can be frustrating when you get into a game and you're really into it and you see somebody with something cool and you realize you have to buy it to get it. That's a frustration that, doesn't feel good. So there's...
Or in a game pops up and says, you can go to our online store to unlock this faster. And just like, unlock it properly, regularly.
Or cheap.
I would say it's... In most single-player focused games, it's not really a big deal. There are some that have it. Most that I play don't, but it is out there even in some single-player games, just to warn you. Also, there are new genres of video games that didn't exist 10 years ago. So there are Battle Royale games that you might have heard of. PlayerUnknown's Battleground. Did I pronounce that correctly?
PlayerUnknown's Battleground?
They say like PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds.
Yeah.
They just
So PlayerUnknown is the guy who made it, and it's his battleground. That's always how I remember it for some reason.
Yeah,
it's
PUBG.
PUBG is fine enough.
PUBG. Then what else is in that space?
You've got Apex Legends. You've got Fortnite, obviously. You've got
Darwin Project.
Darwin Project. You've got Call of Duty has a new Warzone mode. There's some interesting ones, like I can't remember the fantasy themed one. That's pretty cool. But yeah, there's a
Oh,
million.
there's also Tetris 99, which is like it sounds like the stupidest thing on the planet, but it's actually kind of fun.
Yeah.
Which is Tetris competing against 100 other people.
Mhm. And Battle Royale doesn't necessarily imply that the game itself is going to be super difficult or only the best or the cream of the crop is going to rise to the top. There's a lot of randomness. Oh, Escape from Tarkov is obviously a huge one right now. These games are coming out dime a dozen, and they're very popular on stream, which is why I think you see the population of these games shift so much and so fast because they're playing what their favorite streamer is playing. So
Oh yeah, that's another trend that we should mention, which is people watch other people play games now on platforms like Twitch and Mixer, where and this might sound really silly to you if you've never done it before, but it can be really fun to just watch someone comment on a game that they're playing in an entertaining way. Sometimes streamers do weird challenges like speed runs where they try to beat a game as fast as possible, or they play it in a really weird way, like this one dude who played Dark Souls entirely on Donkey Kong bongos just because he could.
And I think one of the main things that you would probably take away if you watch streamers is that there's people who do it because they're good at the game, and there's people who do it because they're entertaining. And the best streamers are the people who can fly right in the middle, right? They might not be amazing S tier gamers at this particular game, but they're also not so good that they're not talking and just staring at the game and are super boring. So if you start to look into games and look into streamers, try to find those people who are in that nice middle ground. Not maybe crazy good at the game, but also not going to put you to sleep if you watch them for more than 10 minutes.
Oh yeah. We should also mention that there's a genre of pre-recorded videos called Let's Plays, where people just kind of play through a great game with commentary and then post it up on YouTube.
Right.
And that's also a genre of video that a lot of people are into.
Right.
Yeah, like channels that specialize in this YouTube channel like Game Grumps is an example of one where people do like comedy mixed with Let's Plays. So that's become just like a whole genre of entertainment.
Right.
Oh yeah, back to new genres in video games. Looter shooters are a thing now. Borderlands, Destiny, The Division. These are games that combine essentially MMOs, RPGs, and shooting.
Yeah. And so these are the types of games that were, previously I feel like maybe if you were a hardcore MMOer, a World of Warcraft or type place, this is kind of where those games have kind of progressed to. Not that World of Warcraft isn't still around, but people have kind of gotten out of that space of, having to commit all that time and effort and energy to a game like WoW, where it almost becomes a job, to a game where you can drop in and drop out, and the combat is a little bit more intensive. So you end up kind of with a little bit more of a skill gap between players, and then you augment it via gear. And I think I went, along that path as an MMO player. And these games really scratch that itch that previously, WoW, Diablo, EverQuest, those sorts of games filled. Whereas the looter shooter is something where I can drop in, drop out, do, a fun shooting mission with some friends in a kind of a cool world, get some gear, upgrade it, pay attention to which stats I'm looking into, use different skills and stuff like that. But then I'm not committing to the same kind of level of commitment that you might in an older school MMO. And you've also got a lot less personalities to manage because it's not a 40-man raid. It's, 6. So if you can get it done with 6, you can enjoy it.
Yeah, it's almost like the kind of game that you might have had a lot of time to play when you were younger, but now you have like family responsibilities. It's something you just want to be able to pick up and play and have kind of an MMO-ish experience, but with a smaller group of people that you don't have to corral and coordinate so much.
And even if you're looking to do that outside of other people, you've got games like Borderlands that kind of give you the same experience just on your own, though they do have things designed for the multiplayer experience. So I think if you're looking for the co-op version of something where you and a bunch of friends can go get something done, and build your characters towards something, and you each get a little bit better and each help a little bit out. Looter shooters are kind of that genre where it's at right now, in the co-op space.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Other new genres that have popped up, you might have heard of a MOBA or a multiplayer online battle arena, which I don't know too much
Yeah,
about the genre.
I,
Maybe
I
Kappa can
I've played a
elucidate.
ton of MOBAs. Your two leaders are Dota 2, and League of Legends. Both of them have an incredibly steep learning curve, an incredibly toxic community, and are some of the most fun games that you'll actually play. But um,
Sorry.
no one's gonna have the patience for you to do it. So it's very difficult to break into the MOBA genre if you haven't already. I think that the people who have are either into it or aren't, and if you aren't right now, it's going to be more hating every minute of it than enjoying it.
Yeah. So just to kind of tell you what these games are, they're kind of like a mix between like a strategy game
Mhm.
and like a speed skill type
Sure.
game where you have to like click
Yeah, you pick a
really
role,
fast
and
strategically.
then you stick to that role, for the most part. And then so there's carries, which are, what it sounds like. It's a character that spends the middle or the early parts of the game just doing small things to make themselves better, XP wise, gold wise, stuff like that, so that at the end of the game they can spend all that experience that you let them build, and then they spend it, and then they carry you to the victory. There's supports who make support that happening. There's tanks who absorb damage. You've got offlaners, junglers. I mean, there's a lot of terminology with this game. The frustrating part about MOBAs for most people trying to get into it is going to be that you can only really experience and learn these games in real matches. It's not like there's really a practice mode that is going to give you really what the real feel of a game flow is going to be like. Yes, there's bots you can go beat up, but the AI on them is just not going to allow you to learn the same kind of things you would with real people. When you learn it with real people, they hate you. So it's the kind of it's a very rough genre, but if you're able to make it past that, you're able to get into it and make the changes or in your play style or learn or have enough people around you to teach you, they're very rewarding, very fun games. There's a reason it's a top tier genre, for lots and lots of viewers, and countries, entire countries go crazy for MOBAs. Um, but
Oh yeah, Russia loves
mhm.
Dota.
Take your time getting into it, and be aware that the community itself, is actively trying to prevent you from playing it for some reason. So be aware, if that's going to be the kind of thing you want to get into.
Oh yeah, absolutely. One more trend that I think we should point out that's changed considerably is the rise of indie
Hmm.
games. Like 10 years ago, indie games were a very small portion of the gaming sphere,
Sure.
and now I would say it's about half of what I
Yeah,
play.
and I think the thing about indie too, it doesn't necessarily mean it's just one guy in his room anymore. You know, you've got indie games being made, or at least financed by EA, or you know what I mean, Ubi, or lots of these other big development houses are giving these indie companies or these indie facilities a chance to make the game they've always wanted to make. There is still plenty of that one man labor of love stuff going on. But generally speaking, the tools that they've got and the access that they've got to some of these developers and the money involved now, has really blown up what you probably are thinking of indie games into you know, I don't want to say a meaningless term, but it's a term that can almost encompass everything. It doesn't mean low quality anymore, like an indie game might have meant, 10 years ago.
Oh yeah, absolutely. One thing that's changed now is the advent of Kickstarter, in Indiegogo, Fig, which are crowdfunding platforms, and they've kind of changed the game for how people get funding to make the games that they want to
Right.
make. So a lot of like veteran developers who have built a reputation in the industry, they go independent. They crowdfund their games because they have the clout to do so, and they get to make what they want to make. And sometimes you end up with popular, critically acclaimed games like Bloodstained Ritual of the Night, if you were looking for a Castlevania virtual successor. And sometimes you cry like an anime fan on prom night and you get Mighty Number Nine,
Right.
which was supposed to be a Mega Man virtual successor. And ended up being less than that, shall we
Right.
say,
Yeah.
charitably.
Um, and kind of in the same vein of indie games as well, I think you're seeing kind of a rebirth of mod communities. If you were familiar with mods, when you were playing 10, 15 years ago, there kind of was a dry spell where a lot of game companies locked down their games and kind of made modding, almost impossible. But in the last 4 or 5 years, I would really say, even outside of the Bethesda games, there's been kind of a re-embracing of modding and modding scenes and what mods can do to fix or change or improve a game. So, in a really good way, I feel like I'm seeing more and more games at least supporting mods, and things like Steam Workshop make it easier than ever to really mod a game to do what you want to do. Um, and so I think that's a really, really, I wouldn't say new, because it's not new, but it's a recent change where previously it looked like it was going to die out.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And for some games, like the mods are the reason to play the
Yeah.
game. I've been playing a lot of Left 4 Dead 2 recently with my friends under lockdown because they have nothing better to
Hmm.
do. And I used to hate that game until we started playing the custom
Right.
campaigns because those are where the fun
I
is.
mean, if you look at like things like the GTA role playing mods, you've got almost an entire industry of streamers who are role playing GTA characters online and interacting with each other, and that's all just a big mod. So there's really interesting stuff going on in the mod space, and um, I think kind of like the indie space is its companies are letting them do it, but they're also in some ways encouraging it, which is new. And because I think they've seen that mods can add life to a game that previously otherwise wouldn't have that kind of longevity.
Yeah, another trend that I want to mention that kind of followed the same trajectory, which might have existed while you were still gaming and then disappeared
Mhm.
and then has reappeared. So you're like coming back at the right time is like double A games,
Right.
slightly lower budget games still published, but usually by major publishers or slightly smaller publishers that are not like the biggest titles that have a multiplayer component and a single player component and like 10 expansion packs, but just like, good meaty 5-6 hour experiences that, still feel like you get your money's worth out
Yeah,
of.
and I think that's it. It's good that that space is back, because it can be frustrating. I don't know if we mentioned this in the newer gamers, but games have gotten a lot longer. And like when we mentioned how long to beat, the reason is because to see a true ending or experience an entire game, you can be talking 100 hours now easily. It's not like it's just JRPGs that are in that universe anymore. Lots and lots and lots of games are kind of
Especially
bloated.
like open world sandbox games, which has become a really popular genre. So your GT like all they're GTA's, but they're also games like Red Dead Redemption that Kappa mentioned earlier, Horizon Zero Dawn, Days Gone, games like that. You can be spending 60, 70 hours in them easy.
Mhm. Yeah. And not always enjoying all of it.
Yeah. So it's nice to have like slightly smaller experiences. One that I just finished is a game called Ori and the Will of the
Mhm.
Wisps, which is a sequel to a game called Ori and the Blind Forest. It's a Metroidvania style game, so in the style of like Metroid, Castlevania games you might have enjoyed when you were younger. But instead of like a blocky computery aesthetic, it's like a watercolor painterly aesthetic.
Yeah, it's gorgeous looking.
Yeah, it's like literally like playing a painting.
Hmm.
It's super super duper cool. So, um, it's also like brutally difficult. So like the aesthetic does not match how difficult it is. But like it's really gorgeous and really fun. Any other like things that have changed or
You know,
slightly different you want
I
to mention?
want to say the community, but I mean, it depends. I think on what you think about gamers. I mean, it's one of those things right now where more than ever, you got older folks, you got younger folks, you got men, you've got women, you've got, it's kind of a space right now where there's a spot for everybody. So even if you're thinking, well, I don't have a lot of friends that are into this, but I'm interested in it, you're going to be able to find a spot. There's a million Discords, there's a million groups, there's a million clans out there that are looking for people just like you, and if there isn't, make one. All the tools are there right now. So, I'm sure between the avocado or our Steam group or anything like that, there's going to be somebody who's into playing with what you are. So take gaming as a social step. Really, that's when it's at its best. Is if you're finding people and connecting and playing a game and using it almost like a chat room that you guys are playing together. I've got at this point literally lifelong friends who I've played video games with for 25, 30 years. We've gone to each other's weddings and stuff. It can be that. So don't just assume that this is going to be you sitting in a room playing Mario, because there's a lot you can do with games that are outside of that world.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I use like multiplayer games as basically Skype with
Mm-hmm.
guns.
Yep. Yeah.
And it's a great way for me to keep in touch with my old friends from undergrad. We used to basically just play video games on my friend's couch every Friday night, and now we do that virtually.
Yeah. Yeah.
Unfortunately, we can't just like punch each other in the arm anymore to distract each other. But now we can make fun of each other online, and that's the closest substitute we're going to get. Now we all live in different cities.
Right. And I mean, the social part of it it's fun. And when you find a game that everybody can enjoy, I mean, I for years, the most socializing I've done with my brother has been in Madden. I mean, that's how we hang out, and that's how we talk, and that's what we do. And it's a fun way to play together. So I really encourage people to look for that social space that fits with what you're into. Whatever that game is or whatever that interest is, there's somebody out there that's with you. It might take getting out into Reddit or something like that, but don't be afraid, because it's not as awful as you might think.
Yeah, I would say there's certainly, I'm not going to mince words. There's still a lot of weird toxicity in the gaming sphere,
Mm-hmm.
but there's also a lot more recognition of that toxicity, and a lot more recognition that people from more diverse backgrounds
Right.
play games as well. It's not just like the image of the old like white dude with facial scruff in his mom's basement playing video games anymore. It's an activity that people of a lot of different ages, a lot of different genders and different ethnicities enjoy. So
Mm-hmm.
you can find your niche. It's there. And even if you don't want to play multiplayer games with other people, there are a lot of spaces for you to just play single player games by yourself and then talk about them online with similarly minded people.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I think that's
out
the
there.
best way to put it. Past, I think maybe the change being in the social space. If you're looking for the one kind of like thing that I think maybe people might be looking for, or people might be wanting to hear, is that games these days are, how we talk about the golden age of TV, the golden age of movies. It's been the golden age for games, and we haven't really even understood how much that's been. But if there's a game you want to play, there's almost always somebody out there who's made that game, and maybe even made a sequel to it at this point. There's so many options for games out there that'll let you do almost exactly what you want to do, or live the life, or play the kind of character you want to play. So get really, if you're looking through some of these Steam lists, don't just look for the top rated things or anything like that. Be willing to kind of get into some of the weeds on the list and figure out the game that you're looking for. Because if you've ever wanted to operate a virtual farm, or drive a bus across a desert, or
Yeah, that's out there.
really weird mini golf or whatever. I mean, pretty much anything you can think of, there's a game for that these days. So be willing to kind of jump out there and try to find the type of game that you want to get into.
Oh, straight up, that really weird mini golf game that Kappa was talking about is a game called What the Golf, and it's one of the best games from last year. It's a really funny, weird game that I really enjoyed. Oh yeah, and as Kappa was saying, don't be afraid to explore a little bit. If anything, there's too many
Yeah,
games out there.
really.
A lot of us, we talk about our backlogs because we just like bought too many games or got too many free games from deals, and I'm just like, when am I ever going to get around to this? You
But it
know,
was on
I've
sale, so I had to. Yeah.
yeah, because there's so many things that look interesting these days, and there's just so many games that I just like. In any given year, there are more games that I would potentially really, really enjoy than I can physically play.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even when even like a game that you might be super excited about, you say, I'm going to wait for this because I'm still playing this other game I was really excited about 6 months ago. The background can really kind of just creep up on you over time.
Oh yeah, like I just started a game called I the Somnium Files, which came out last September,
Hmm.
last August. I
I'm
forget. It came out last fall.
I'm playing Control
Ish.
because instead I played Disco Elysium because I instead what I mean, like, it just kind of builds off of his stuff. So enjoy the games you're playing, and if you're not, move on. Don't worry about 100% or completing or beating games or stuff like that. Really, if it's driving you crazy and you're not getting anywhere with it, or it's just a frustrating game, don't give into that sunk cost fallacy and feel like you've got to complete the game to get your money's worth, because you'll really quickly learn to hate a lot of games hardcore that way.
Oh yeah, I tend to complete games, but the main reason I do that is because it gives us material to talk about on the podcast.
Oh, and if I
So
can't complete a game, I just cheat till I can. So I'm the same. I won't beat my head against the wall. I'll just pop on cheat engine and give myself a million health or whatever. But don't get stuck into that whole. You have to 100% do that.
yeah, if you're really liking a game, you want to 100% it, go for
Yeah.
it. I've done it with a couple of games. I did it with Sleeping Dogs a few years ago. But for the most part, I play a game to the credits and then I move on to the next one. And even games that I really, really loved. Some of my favorite games I just played once and then I moved
Yep.
on. And, if you have games available, especially if you're just getting into gaming or getting back into gaming, I'd recommend try a variety of things. Try a puzzle game, try a shooter, try an RPG, try like a weird narrative experiment. You know,
Yeah.
get out there. There's a whole wide world of stuff to try. You might not know that you like some genre or style of game until you try it. So
Yeah.
just go for it.
Absolutely.
All right. Anything else you want to
Nah,
mention before
hope
we?
that well, you know what? I will mention one thing. Me and you will probably hang out in the comments for this one as much as we can and answer people's questions. So if you've got like a specific question, or you wanna actually make the jump, or look at prices for things, or let you know where to start off, obviously, I mean, we'll hang out in the comments, and we're gonna try to get this one out real quick, because I know at least a lot of people I've seen are interested in getting into this. So we'll try to help you as much as we can.
Yeah, and absolutely. If you are on Discuss, you can at me at Merve2, and I will try to reply to your comment. Or you can pop into my Ask box on Tumblr. I'm Spanky Merv on Tumblr. Pop in my Ask box there, and I will. I have literally answered every single ask I've ever received. I mean, I've only received like 10 asks, so that's not hard. But feel free to blow up my Ask box. I can say words. Ask box with questions.
I'm more than happy to help too. So, there's resources out there, and I think all of us would be more than happy if you're looking to make that leap to kind of help you do it.
Yeah, and we have
Yeah,
opinions. If you want our true
yeah. We try to keep this
opinions,
one as free of opinions as we can, but trust us, if you're looking for it, we'll give you an answer.
don't worry, they're not like all negative opinions. We love a lot of stuff too.
Absolutely.
We wouldn't be here if we didn't love video games. So we want to spread the joy as much as we can. Alrighty. If you'd like to keep up to date with the podcast, if you're a first time listener or you're a returning listener, you can follow us on our website at avocadogamescast.wordpress.com, where we post. I am so bad at words today. Where we post each episode along with a link dump that fact checks everything we say. And you can also subscribe to us on iTunes or Google Play. Just search for Avocado Gamescast. And we've been mentioning The Avocado, which is the community where Kappa and I hang out. There are weekly games threads where you can find a community of like-minded, progressive-minded people who love to talk about video games. We have weekly games threads twice a week. We have rundowns on new releases every week on Tuesday. And we also have irregular articles, let's say, on different aspects of video games. So great place to check out if you are getting into gaming, or if you just want to talk about movies and music and all that stuff. That's also available to you. You can check that website out at the-avocado.org.